In Tuesday's red and blue political roundup, President Trump has now spoken with 7 potential candidates for Justice Anthony Kennedy's spot on the Supreme Court. The short list of 7 includes 2 women. It is down from 25 names the president had originally floated for the opening on the court. The White House says the president will announce his nominee on his self-imposed deadline of Monday. Joining me now from Washington is Chris Cadelago. He's a White House reporter for Politico. Right, Chris, thanks for being with us. What more do we know about the candidates President Trump met with Tuesday?
So these are all candidates who have been on a pre-vetted list that the president goes way back to 2016 when he ran. These are all folks where there may be some disagreement among some of the advocates around the borders, but these are people who are largely been vetted, people who the president would be excited about no matter who he picks. And so I think the question comes down to, as it often does with President Trump, chemistry, and that's what he hopes to get out of these meetings. He's also, of course, looking for someone who, as he puts it, could come from central casting, someone with a good background, someone with an intriguing story to tell. And so all of those things I think he's trying to determine now, and of course his announcement coming next week.
Well, you recently wrote that President Trump's list of potential Supreme Court candidates helped him win the 2016 presidential election, but could now hurt him with Democrats and even some Republicans. Why do you think the list could now be a liability?
So because the list has been out there now for so long, it's allowed Democrats and their allies to do a lot of opposition research into these folks, to really dig into their cases. Under past circumstances, we would have seen nominees' names trickle out of the White House. There would have been names leaked. Different groups would have been putting forward potential nominees that they liked the best. This time around, most people expect the president, and he has said himself, that he would be choosing from the list. And so it's just given folks a lead time. We know that some liberal groups will be going into districts and putting pressure on senators and Senate candidates, either or to vote against whoever the president nominates.
Well, Politico is reporting on another topic here that EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt placed a former political fundraising ally in charge of an office that handles Freedom of Information Act requests for his office. What has been the response to this from watchdog groups and the EPA?
So this is one in a long line of Pruitt stories that have been very stinging. Another report came out tonight that talked about Pruitt allegedly approaching the president and asking to fill the role of Jeff Sessions, which Pruitt has put out a statement denying. This story that we had today, a number of groups have raised red flags about the idea that someone who's in charge of releasing potentially public information had a close political relationship with Administrator Pruitt. And so I think these are just a long sort of drumbeat of stories, and I think clearly the president, who has said he's had some issues with some of these stories and that some of them have looked troubling, obviously none of it has moved him to fire Pruitt, and folks are telling us they don't expect that to happen anytime soon.
Well, lawmakers have called for Pruitt to be fired over a number of other scandals, and the president has yet to do so. Why is President Trump keeping Pruitt around? Well,
simply, I think they have a good relationship, and the second point would be I think he thinks he's doing a good job in the role. I think he likes the fact that he's been slashing regulations. I think he likes the approach he's taken there. And so, at this point, there have been such a negative drumbeat of stories that you almost don't know what it would take for him to dismiss Pruitt. It would almost have to be something negative against Trump himself.
Right, exactly. Well, we know Pruitt was recently confronted while dining in Washington by a woman holding a baby. Let's take a look at that.
We deserve to have somebody at the EPA who actually does protect our environment, somebody who believes in climate change and takes it seriously for the benefit of all of us, including our children. So I would urge you to resign before your scandals push you out.
So we know, Chris, that multiple administration officials have been confronted in public places in recent weeks. Do you think the White House is more likely to sort of dig in with Pruitt after confrontations like that one take place?
I think so. I think that the idea that there are pictures and videos of folks coming up to administration officials, folks protesting outside the home of advisor Stephen Miller, obviously the situation with Sarah Huckabee Sanders and the Red Hen restaurant in Virginia. These are things that the president and his supporters can point to as sort of the intolerance of the left. And I think that given all the trouble that Pruitt has had, this probably pales in comparison, and I would not see it as impacting his job.
Meanwhile, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is traveling to North Korea Thursday. President Trump tweeted Tuesday morning that conversations with Pyongyang are, quote, going well. What are the goals for Secretary Pompeo's visit?
You know, this is a high-risk move that the president initially made in this agreement with North Korea. This is going to be Secretary Pompeo's third visit to North Korea. It comes amid just a slew of reports about whether North Korea is holding up its end of the bargain here, whether they have, what their ambitions are, and there's just a whole bunch of doubts about what they really want to do. So I think this is a high stakes visit for Secretary Pompeo, and I think certainly given that all the president has put on the line with his relationship with North Korea, this is something that the country and the president need to go well, not only politically, but in terms of global politics.
So as we've been speaking, Chris, before we let you go, I just want to ask you, back on Scott Pruitt for a moment. Laura Ingraham has tweeted Tuesday evening about Scott Pruitt once again. You'll recall it was a few weeks ago that she first voiced this notion of Scott Pruitt needing to leave. She tweets on Tuesday, "Pruitt is the swamp, drain it." Does that in any way change the equation, you think, for Scott Pruitt?
Well, we know the president has a kitchen cabinet of folks that he consults with, some of them in the news business. You did mention that Laura Ingraham has come out saying this before. I think it was a couple weeks ago. So I would not bet that alone would have much of an impact. I just think that given all the news that's come out, the White House is well aware of this. There are folks pretty close to the president in the White House who would like to see Pruitt go. But the president has not made that move, and the fact that he hasn't so far would just indicate that there's so much going on right now. They've been trying to solve, in some ways, the immigration issue. The president has an upcoming meeting with Vladimir Putin. There's, of course, North Korea, as you mentioned. So this idea that the president would be opening up a important position in the cabinet at the moment, with the elections bearing down, it doesn't seem to be the timing that he would want.
All right, we'll continue to watch it all. Chris Cadelago. Chris, thanks very much.
Thank you.